All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GameSoundCon Music Demo Derby. We're joined by Tom Salta, Austin Wintory, Paul Lipson, and Jason Hayes. Let's jump into the first demo. For those that are unfamiliar with the format, each demo is about 1 minute long, and after we listen to the demo, we'll go through some rounds of feedback, then move on to the next one.
All right. Did everyone hear that?
I see Paul forming opinions.
Oh, yeah. I can hear the snapping in my brain. Snap, snap. Little rubber bands going.
You want to take it away?
Oh, sure. That was really lovely. There was a lot of depth. I was immediately impressed by the orchestration and some of the separation of parts and the ensemble aspect of the piece. And so compositionally, I thought it was very mature and well presented in that sense from a layout standpoint. If there's an area there, I think it was maybe more on the technical side, because all the intent of the orchestration I felt was lovely, and it had a nice brooding mystery, and it was very a story unfolding. But I think technically, I had a little bit of, there could be some potential work on your reverb and your separation. So I think the reverb was not, there's some areas there that needed a little zhuzh. I know I'm working that word into a lot of my meetings these days, so you're welcome to it, zhuzh. But there's some reverb and there was some area right at 17. That's where frequency wise, and I think, Tom, you and I made the same face probably right around 17, 18, where everything got kind of compressed and it was like a whole bunch of sort of mid, high, mid. And I could hear all the orchestration, so I knew the intent. It was more of a production side of it. So I really liked the composition. It was clearly really mature. And I just think maybe one more pass of creating the right separation and actually just doing some mix, and then thinking about how the sound stage of those instruments should really be laid out the way a traditional orchestra would actually be laid out. But other than that, I mean, I wanted to hear more, and I thought it was very compelling and very idiomatic in a good way.
I can jump in. I largely agree with that. It had a definite kind of Elfman circa 1992, Batman Returns sort of melodrama to it, which is fun. You can feel that in recent like Ratchet and Clank and things like that. But I'm curious the general consensus of the folks here. One of the things that strikes me is that in the context of a demo, the presentation of the material as a kind of like micro narrative is sort of important. And this one had that classic like abruptly and unexpectedly ended in a way that's not uncommon of an actual cue. In the context of some unknown game or film or something, but is always slightly disconcerting in a demo situation. At least that's always been the wisdom I've been sort of imparted into by others, over the years is that there's a certain pizzazz, dog and pony show to what demos are, that this should have a more pointed button of some kind on the end would be the summary of that. But I'm curious if you all agree with that sentiment, if it matters. That's just always what I've kind of understood.
Yeah. May I? I'll go in there.
Oh yeah, sure.
Great. Yeah. To your point, Austin, Yeah, I mean, it's always one of those things. It's like, it's always about first impressions. And when you're talking about a demo derby, I mean, it's too, the goal is too esoteric as far as, well, what am I trying to show? I mean, a lot of times people are just trying to say, look at what I can do. Am I on the level of a professional? There's no brief as far as, well, we're looking for an action cue that loops or an ending or a theme, or, so I think in that sense, I try to overlook some of the the decisions on how to present the material. I'm going to jump into something that's very different, or at least that does not overlap too much with what anyone said, is the on a technical level, and I mean purely technical, and I'm listening to this here and the MP3 to make sure it's not a Zoom thing, but there is something very lo-fi about this. And I don't think it's the music's fault. I think it's the whatever method was used to create this file. I don't know whether it's the MP3 bit depth or a combination. I don't even think it's like an EQ problem, but it just sounds like a bad recording. And I don't think it has anything to do with the composition or the production or the arrangement. I think there's literally something I'd like to say, could I see how you actually exported that file? Because something's not good. It doesn't sound, it sounds like second, third, fourth generation, but not in a good way, like not even in a pure digital way. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but check your settings.
So I thought that's good. So I would say that, into Austin's point, I think it's a really, really good idea to try to make this material, have a button at the end so that basically, if you're listening to it, you're being taken on a journey. It's a satisfying journey. It's very mysterious. I love the harmonic language. It really had a wonderful color to the harmonic language. And so, it's intriguing, it's mysterious. But yeah, you want to hear some kind of button that makes you feel like, okay, you've gotten to the completion. Even if it's just a minute-long journey, it's like, I was invested in it. So yeah, you want to get dropped off in a way that you feel, some kind of satisfaction about it. But I thought it was very good. It got my attention right away. It sounded very professional, great orchestration. So that's what I say. So I thought it had a good, adventurous kind of sound for sure. I like that. It opened with a nice theme with the French horns, big, big French horns. And I'm a huge fan of big French horn wall of horns. But I found that it went on that color. It had it's a wonderful spice and can be very powerful. But it seemed to dominate so much what was going on in that piece that I think having a change of the colors would help these really good compositional ideas shine a little bit better with just kind of changing up the color of what's going on in the orchestration. Okay. Go ahead, guys.
Right on there, Jason. Not only changing the color, but also how about changing the pattern of the percussion track or some other things? It became very monotonous. Dun, 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 dun. From beginning to end, there was only one slight change, which was a change in intensity on there. But again, if you have a very small thing, very small piece of music, 60 seconds, whatever, you gotta do a lot. You got to use that 60 seconds. Why not change that up a little? Or some accents. Just take it on a journey. Show some, variety. And, remember, if we're talking anywhere close to game music world, repetition is going to be your worst enemy. So the last thing you want to do is have something in 60 seconds that never changes, any element in that music. And so percussion, I'll just focus on that because I know both Paul and Austin have plenty, I'm sure, to say about orchestration and things, melodies and stuff like that.
Maybe I'll jump in, and then Austin, you can put the button on it at the end, because it needed that as well. Absolutely agree with Jason and Tom, spot on, especially the sameness, the percussion. It felt like a sketch. I mean, it felt like this could have used a ton of more depth there. I will say, great job on creating harmonic movement. I mean, that's a really good indicator of having it move around. Going back to what Jason said, yeah, I think that not only is it a sort of this, okay, you've got your French horn, but it's also, you have to decide where you're going to move the low brass. And, I wanted to say, if you're going to commit, then let's get the bones working and create the separation between your woodwinds and then your strings, because your strings were absolutely swallowed and never had their own voice. And, in a little bit in the mix, I heard some like harp popping up right alongside this sort of brass. And again, you have to create your separation between your French horns and your low brass, because that is a big difference. And you're sort of straddling not sure where to go there. I don't know if that's a sample thing or an orchestration decision. But you could have actually rounded down to low brass and then brought up strings and woodwinds for a whole nother thing to go with basically what Tom just said, just create some interest there from an orchestration standpoint. And then melodically, I think you made a strong statement, and then you have to look at how are you going to reiterate your thesis statement and create some variation as you're going, as opposed to either just keeping the same thing for 1 minute. So overall, I felt like, a good sort of sketch. I mean, to me, it felt like a sketch. You just threw in this, like, here's my drum loop. You can't really do that on a demo if you're seriously demoing for, a score. You can't just be, well, here's my placeholder drums. You get it. It's like, in 5 seconds, Tom's like, bye. Or and I am too. I'm like no, because there's just too many people doing so much nuanced things, and if that's an area of like, what, I'm not quite comfortable doing percussion the way I want to, then partner with someone and find a way to kind of make it happen. But if you don't do that and you expect us to fill in the blanks, it actually could be a big detractor, to the point where, again, this felt like a sketch, but maybe not ready for prime time.
Mm-hmm. I actually don't have anything to add separate from all that. That's pretty much all. You've all kind of tapped on the things that occurred to me while I was listening to it. And so rather than just fill dead air, let's keep going and get through them all.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to move on to the next demo from Randall Shattuck.
So, a couple of little points. One thing is, if you're going to use some recognizable little cool sample flavors, I remember that one. What was it? It was like years ago. I think it's a storm drum or east west. I don't know what it is, but anytime you're going to use things that are very commercially available where you can take your finger and push the button and it's like becomes a feature of your track, I would go out of your way to make it more original, more unrecognizable, and more unique, because everyone else has the same samples that you do too if you are using commercially available ones. So I really highly recommend getting creative, and don't just take something that's right out of the box and like, oh, this sounds great, I guess I'm the only one that has this. It's like hit the button and it goes. So these days you could do so much. You could just put on a distortion, million plugins, whatever thing, filter, auto wah, I don't care. Just the list is endless, and you'll be amazed. Reverbs, distorted reverbs, filtering things, and you can make it your own. So that's one thing. And also, when you're doing production, it's going to be like a rock hybrid, electronica thing, whatever. Go out of your way to listen to listen to reference material and try to really pay attention to the full spectrum. Does it have enough beef? Does it have enough punch? Does it have the right low end? Does it feel satisfying, or does it kind of feel like it's falling short? You have to kind of be honest with yourself, and you learn from the school of listening. So just 2 little points. Take it away, guys.
I can jump in. I definitely was also going crazy trying to remember what that sound is from. I was like, is that Distorted Realities, or it's one of those like classic, very loopy? But I agree. I had the same exact thing. It pinged as I have been cycling through my libraries and demoed that sound and then rejected it on the basis of it's so memorable because it's so distinctive that it will always pop out as a pre-baked thing. And so I think your point is, I'm just basically one-upping your point. The other thing that I would add is this piece had a lot of personality, but somehow never said anything, because it was like all this cool ear candy and like gestural kind of movements of, big string run, and then the cool bass sound come and like opening with the kind of bending strings, tuning orchestra kind of sound, and one sort of super slick sound after another. And yet I never really felt like, okay, that's all in service of now here's the statement, or here is the arrival point of all these gestures. And so it's amazing how something can be so well executed, and then afterward you go, I don't actually, other than the sample that I recognized, I don't really remember anything other than just a succession of gestures. And again, there's certain cues and certain contexts, and especially kind of like animated stuff, where that ends up being kind of what you end up with because you're, scoring a bunch of things in a very bespoke way. And but in a demo situation, it feels like you want to be able to walk away with something other than just remembering it had personality. I mean, that's better than nothing. So I don't want to dismiss that for sure. Like it didn't feel cookie cutter, but yeah, it definitely felt like it. If we'd kept listening, maybe we then would have arrived at the thing that it was finally teeing up.
Jason, you want to jump in?
Sure. Okay. Well, you know what? Some good points there. I like the grooviness of it. I thought it was kind of fun and groovy, which is kind of cool. Definitely, this one had an ending, but it was a very abrupt ending. It was like it just came up out of nowhere, and it's like, well, it's almost like, well, goodness, it's just kind of it didn't quite feel like it was like it was something intrinsically developed as an ending. It just kind of like came up out of nowhere. But another thing I was going to say about it is that this piece, and I hear this a lot in music sometimes, where you can just tell the phrasing. It's like, okay, now we have 4 measures of this, and now we have 4 measures of this, and now we do 4 measures of that. And it felt like there was something about it that had a predictable quality in the way it went from section to section. And you don't have to always put people completely off every second, but it's nice to have it to where you can't just map it out with a gut instinct level. So that had a little that quality. I think you could benefit from kind of changing up some of the phrasing.
Yeah, and I'll just add exactly to that. And I think obviously Tom and Austin, Jason, you all had really good points. But if you're gonna do like augmented rock band, like you've got a classic, like, here's my rock band that I'm augmenting with some orchestral elements or even some electronica stuff. You have to sort of nail the rock element of it. So I had a problem with just the distortion, and as a guitar player, I'm like, there's a lot you could have done to add power. And I think, Tom, you started off with talking a little bit about that too, just adding the power. But if you're going to go full Kill Bill or even kind of have a little Wink throwback, then it better be grooving and funky, and you need to over index on that. We've all heard all of these a million times, but if you're going to jam, it better jam. And if you're going to do these sort of almost disco flavored runs that are, if it's circa 1971, then over index on it and make sure you nail it. Because if you just don't quite hit it, then we're all sitting here saying, oh, you just didn't quite really hit it, on top of your samples are showing, which then it's a compound problem. So I get the intent and it's cool, but if you're going to be that specific idiomatically with what you're going to put as your demo, then it really needs to be crafted, at least in my point of view. Do it better than what's out there. There's 30 years of content now that can kind of do that really well. So I think, Tom, you said it, it's the school of listening. It would be nice to kind of really do your homework on that.
Awesome. So the next demo is going to be from Maggie Evans.
Such a happy ending.
Yeah, it was. I'll jump in. I'm going to pick my own little box to stay in. I'm going to talk about just the mix. And so with this kind of music, I just really wanted to get my hands on the stems of that one, uncompressed and everything, because I felt what was happening is that you had some really cool stuff, but it was mixed in a way that that squashed it and overdid it. Like, it made the percussion. I realize you got some of the side chain things going on, and some of that is intentional, the things, but it was way too, like, it just went. It just squashed it all. The percussion became super loud and clicky, and everything else just became very small and just minimalized. So I think this is I'm just going to focus on the mix issue itself. It could have been so much better to my ears, and I think sonically and width-wise and every-wise, if that mix was a little less squashy. And some of us, we get our hands on cool little toys like Ozone or whatever these multi-processing things are, and they can be very dangerous because one little click and you can destroy, your whole week of work, just because you think it sounds good because it's loud. But I encourage just one thing. First, again, A/B. A/B your stuff to other music that you respect, that is in the same kind of ballpark, and sometimes, a lot of times, A/B it softly. You know what I mean? Because it's so easy to think something sounds really good when it's really loud, or, in a big set of nice speakers or whatever it is it just helps put them all, it's kind of like levels the playing field a little bit. So mix-wise, pay a little bit more attention to what's going on. I think you got too much squashing and limiting and compression and side chaining, and that's it.
That's good stuff. Can I say something real quick? So, it's interesting because it had a nice, I think, a personal sound to the music, and I like that a lot. It was interesting because at the very, very end, the drums stop and you have a little moment. And I was sitting up because I was like, oh, wow, something interesting is happening because of the change. And that was great. And so it's also a way of saying that having those same drums go out through the entire piece before that, it just, I don't think you want to have it be this thing that you can just kind of feel the same exact drum groove the whole time. It just doesn't sound kind of constantly fresh and interesting. But of course, it made that last moment really nice. But I think it was maybe too much of that same drum sound the whole time.
Yeah, I just want to just add a slight variation on Tom's point about the mix and all the kind of use of the side chaining and the kind of pumping nature of it. It's very cool, but I think to the point, I would just argue to commit harder if you're gonna make that your thing. Like if you listen to, like, the first thing it made me think of was what Olivier Driviere wrote for the game Remember Me 10 years ago or whatever, where it's just so unambiguous, the idea that is being explored of this kind of mangling of subsets of the music, in tandem with one another. And it's very clear this isn't a mix problem. This is the idea. And you have to commit really hard so that you're not left in this ambiguous middle zone going, is that a mix thing, or is that like a cool, aspiration at an unusual sound? And so I think everything you were saying, Tom, is right. And my recommendation is just go more extreme. You can always walk things back, but it was hard to tell how intentional that was.
I would agree. And just to add, I felt like the ending was tagged on. I just was sort of like, how do I end? So it was so drastically different than I sort of smiled at the end because I'm like, it was totally harmonically different. And it's not like, a nice Picardy third ending. It was like literally just this tacked on thing. But I will say this, for the first 3 to 5 seconds, I loved the frequency differential and the high transient nature of the percussion. It was sort of this rock stick, sort of bamboo on burlap sort of thing. I'm like, that could be interesting. But as soon as it kept going, I'm like, it's going to stay the same, which it did. So, and then it just folded into exactly what Tom and Jason and Austin have already articulated. So I would just say that this is definitely a mix issue. And when you have big electronic pad-based gestural things that are repeating, all of it is going to be on the detail and the craftsmanship of that and your mix decision choice and how you present it. So if it's going to be relatively repeaty and samey, then you're going to over-index on exactly what Austin was saying, which is the double down on a feature of the piece that kind of is pumping and moving in a different way. Rather than harmonic movement, it's a technical or a mixed movement. But again, I was like, I love that high transient separation of the drums, but for the first 3 to 5 seconds of the piece, and then you kind of lost me there because it just wasn't being built and crafted and developed in the way that everyone's articulated. So I think there's an opportunity there.
Awesome. So our next demo is going to be from Amy Liu.
Hi, Amy.
maybe I'll just jump in on this one. Beautiful, very singable. So I want to just give you some credit right off the bat for your melodic intent. I was hearing a singer. Love to hear some vocal element there. If you have an opportunity to call up Jillian Aversa or call up a vocalist you might know, to just sing along, that would add such a beautiful sense of harmonic complexity or melodic texture to that. It was very danceable, there's movement. I could kind of feel the color, and it's very singable. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I think that I was missing low end moments there. I heard the low end that I did hear was kind of this very long to start sort of bowed bass in the earlier middle part, but then it sort of dropped out and never came back. So I'd love to hear a low end world there that helps juxtapose some of the sort of higher periodicity of the percussion and the more singable moment to fill it out. But I loved how singable it was. It was definitely memorable. And I think that I was almost hearing someone singing along with that. So very beautiful, clearly very interesting. Also, as far as your cadential rhythm, that was really interesting. I was unexpected. You started and stopped in some unexpected ways that I thought was really cool. So other than maybe a few organizational things or some mixed things, and especially around how you're handling sort of the split between your low end and how you're featuring some of your melody, I really enjoyed it a lot.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a big market for this kind of writing right now, and I think it nailed it pretty damn spot on. I think in a way it created the impression of being a succession of new sections, all internally really solid, but given that singable, very ultra melodic and kind of catchy nature of it, I wouldn't have minded some kind of orchestrationally amplified reprise of the opening, which felt like the kind of main point. It felt like you just came, no real introduction, just straight in, which is an admirable thing to pull off. And it didn't bother me at all. I liked that. And I was like, I want to hear that back, but add like a trombone counter melody or something. And like you said, Paul, kind of fill out the bottom end but you could all but reprise your opening. If this was a standard pop song, that's plenty of time to have given us two different passes at the verse. And it's really quite possible within a 1 minute runtime to make something that sticks with you, but it felt like it was just doling out new information enough that I can't quite hold on to that opening bit the way I'd like to, whereas if it had come back one more time. So just a structural thing, because it's like, you've got a good thing, so, sort of squeeze the rag a little tighter, I would say.
I'm just going to jump in there, and because my point is going to reinforce and one up your point now, Austin, I do, and also Paul's point. One, Amy is a wonderful singer. I've had the opportunity to mentor her a bit, and she could have easily done there. So I would say,
oh, what a miss!
Exactly,
it would have been great to have that
on the reprise, Amy. You should have. You went from section A to B to C to D. And then you came back with like some E sort of alt thing. You fit so much in there, Amy. You work so hard on that, and it's wonderful that you can do all that. But I would have sacrificed maybe one of those sections for a reprise and brought your beautiful voice in there to double it, because this would serve more than one purpose here. And you have the instrument. It would be beautiful, and it would make it more memorable. Just like any, popular composer always just repeats that theme one more time, especially with themes like this that are very dense and has complexity in it. It might need a one or two more times of hearing it to kind of remember that theme. So take advantage of that and focus on allowing someone to recall the beautiful theme that you wrote, and use all the assets that you have at your disposal. But awesome work.
Well, people had great things to say about this, so I won't really add anything else except maybe to mention that right off the bat, that theme is really good, and it has a really not it jumps out at you, and really nice melody writing there. So I thought it was a good piece, great piece.
Alrighty, so we're going to move on to the next demo from Marcus Lawson.
Go ahead, Austin. You want to jump in?
No, I'll chase you.
Yeah. All right. I'll stay in my little box here to give other people some room. But my where I got off the train, you barely survived some of that melodic transition material at 38 and then at 49. I mean, like barely managed to pull that off. So there's some just technical things as far as how that was laid out, voice led, and actually transitioned. I mean, in some cases, I would have actually gone back and rethought those transitions. I applaud the transition and the movement, but at that speed, you're sort of running through mud there. It's pretty slow. It gave me a lot of opportunity to hear what you were doing. And we should probably workshop that a little bit, because you survived. You kind of came out on the other end. But Austin, you may have some things to say about this as well. Your orchestration and journey into the modulation, it's not even really a modulation, it's really your cadential movement to bring it up. I think specifically at 38 and then at 48, 49. Ooh, I was grimacing there, like, oh, you're almost falling off the balance beam there. So definitely go back and clean up your voice leading and your cadential movement, because clarity and simplicity is what you need to survive something like that and to successfully convey it. Because if it's overdone and not quite voice led correctly, there's some movement that was just definitely, at least in my ear, sort of weaker choices of how you were resolving it. The resolution you landed, but I was sort of off the train there when you started to try to move in your internal voice leading, specifically at those points in the cue. There's a few other things I'll say, but that's just my one point I wanted to wrap up and start with.
Yeah, you kind of had a glancing blow at the main thing I was going to mention there, which was I don't know if I'm just kind of ADD in my listening naturally, just in who I am. But I always struggle with music where it sets up a pattern and it's moving so reliably and particularly slowly, such that I feel like if I keep listening to this, I know what my life is going to be like for the next 45 seconds with complete predictability. And like, I find it very difficult to get through music that just lays out a path so clearly and then delivers on that with no real surprises. So that first maybe 10 to 12 seconds with this kind of crack, like it was like, okay, it's pulling the bowstring back and then it's going to unleash chaos. And then it was like, nope, it's going to keep going. And more or less, you're basically walking alongside a brachiosaur. And if this was part of a 10-minute, you think of like the big portal scene in Avengers Endgame, which I also thought this felt a tad compositionally similar to, if I'm being honest. But if you think of that scene, it's nested within like an hour-long development. So it functions that you have this prolonged, slow kind of ratcheting up that eventually unleashes everything. But in a 1-minute context, it's the difference of what you can say in a haiku versus in a novel. You have to lean into the the situation that you're in. So I think this kind of music is very difficult. There's many times where this is exactly what's called for on a project, and the nuances of how you do it, like you were saying, Paul, with the sort of not quite a modulation and those kinds of things like that can all be assessed on its own terms. But in the context of a demo, I would hesitate to put a piece built this way, even in its most perfect execution, because it's sort of a long, slow build for not that great of a payoff in a world where you're used to things coming at you within seconds. In a world of demos, I mean. So I just want to throw that in there.
Can I jump in? The second that the music started, to me, it felt like this is now the ending. This is the big ending. Like, it's like it came on like from the very beginning. It's just like now it's the end. So it's like, in theory, there would have been something to build up to this point. That now we have this slow, kind of huge brooding kind of feeling. And I think if you earn the way into that, then you can get the big payoff. Like, oh, now it's slow, but it's like it seems strange to start with what felt like the ending after a big buildup that you never get to hear. So, I mean, you only have a minute, so I guess you could always just examine how you can do like a big finish or something. But yeah, that's just the first thing that occurred to me. It just seemed like, well, there was nothing that came before this that prepared me for this making sense to have happen. But I do agree, like we had said with some earlier things, and I think Tom mentioned it as well. It's like you don't want to have a situation where you can kind of tell the way it's laid out and that pattern is established, and now you're just along for the ride and you can already fill in the blanks. And that's going to take away from it. You keeping on the edge of your seat for this big climactic moment. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, and I will echo that. And Austin's point there about the predictability is certainly one of the issues of the piece. It also doesn't help it because it just feels very generic. Anytime you're going to just stick with traditional orchestration, in my opinion, you got to step it up somewhere else. It's got to say something special. Otherwise, it's just another Me Too piece. Anyone can do that, and everyone can do that in the professional arena, certainly, and even non-professional. So many people can do orchestral work very well. And also, just briefly, to the presentation here, there was really this abrupt non-introduction that kind of just came in out of somewhere. Maybe it was a clip because it was a longer piece and you chose just to pick that ending. But for the sake of something like this, where it's a demo derby, treat it as a standalone piece. At the very least, try to give it some kind of distinct, important, meaningful kind of intro. And the same for the ending. It was kind of like and it just kind of came and went. And I'm not sure what I took away from it. So just some more constructive feedback for you.
Yeah, actually, can I just add, when you said it's like, oh, I can do that also, I think it's worth adding, and other people have done it with bigger budgets and more polish. So you're like, if you're just submitting that sort of standard orchestral palette, you're up against Henry Jackman at Air spending a week putting together the component parts of a piece of music like that or whatever. You know what I mean? And even then there's going to be things in it that are going to pull it away from the standard anyway. But yeah, I think that anytime you're entering something that just sounds like it has the palette of everything else, remember that unless you're dropping enormous sums of money on the production of it, you're not just competing compositionally, you're competing production wise in a way that is really hard to win at that point.
I'll steal the first spot on this and just keep it brief, allow other people to go. Really, there's a lot of very cool originality in this, and I always appreciate that. Not a typical sounding piece at all, not typical use of orchestration. That was really cool. I saw a missed opportunity to reprise that theme again, or make the theme more important. You had an opportunity there to come up with a sustained melody over that motif that could have just been, now that's catchy, and both of them together are catchy, and I heard it more than once. So that would have been really, really nice. But the development was really nice. It started with one element. I'm a fan of that, and then it kind of developed and more and bigger and and then the end. Melody wins all the time, because especially with a demo like this or a pitch or anything, the thing that's going to make you stand out amongst the competition is the memorable factor. And so the more things in there that you can make memorable, you can have hooks over hooks, things like that. That's always a good thing. But overall, very nice, fresh approach. Good job.
Yeah, I'm going to add exactly to what Tom just said. And what's interesting is this is memorable to me for completely unexpected reasons. The sympathetic vibrations you had on your opening acoustic string texture was super slick and classy, and like, oh, wow. Like I grinned. I was like, that's just tasty. I don't know if that's sampled or just something you recorded, but I mean, that organic level and kind of down in the weeds level was really heartwarming for me. And also, I came away with Downton Abbey, Breath of the Wild. So it's Downton of the Wild, or Remains of the Ocarina.
That's so funny. I did too. I picked up on that, and there was one part in the melody. Yes,
I know, right? And I was like, I'm dating myself. I just said the Remains of the Day, like Austin's on the floor now laughing. But that's totally unexpected, and I'm a huge fan of all of that. So I was like, you got me. So melody, but I'm going to remember that amazing little buzzing, sympathetic vibration texture you had, because hell yeah, for putting that in the recording. I'm just going to remember it. You're going to be the vibration texture guy. And then I'm going to say Downton of the Wild. I'm going to remember it. So I thought it was charming. It was completely unexpected and interesting. And it was very original. It was actually pretty bold. And I think, like, from a standpoint of, wow, I want to collaborate with someone like this and develop it, I was sort of like, yeah, that was really cool. So well done.
I really just will add, in addition to that I picked up on that same little kind of buzzy string that was cool. And relatedly, I also liked, at first I wasn't sure if I was going to be into it, and then it kind of committed more fully. That little sort of fuzzy distortion that kind of takes us out at the end, it cropped up earlier and kind of raised an eyebrow, but then I thought, okay, no, that was teeing up a thing to come back, and that there was a craft in that I kind of appreciated, and I liked that it added to the unexpected nature of it. You've got this thing that is sort of threatening to be very, like you said, very Downton Abbey and kind of stately and proper, and there's these things that are pulling out from under that in an interesting way, going, yeah, but it's like, what skeletons do they have in their closet kind of thing, and that all really served it. It's really good.
I like that piece a lot. I thought that it did sound different and cool. And it was neat because with all the short notes that are going by, you imply some really interesting harmonic choices with the way that is put together. And then also, by way of contrast, I really like the release of the feeling at, say, 41 seconds, you have a whole new section. And now all of a sudden you go into like kind of thing of longer, more legato kind of longer notes. And, it's a really refreshing change. So I thought overall, really nice piece of music. I liked it.
All right, awesome. That was Ryan Wyman, and hey, Ryan, he and I went to college together. Anyway.
Yeah, nice job, Ryan.
What could it be that sets a sailor's heart upon the seven seas, to tread on fabled sands of gold, or simply to be free?
I'm sure there will be no opinions held here.
Yes. Too many ideas to share, but which one?
Tom,
Just make a
Yeah,
suggestion.
go ahead, Tom.
Nothing to do with any particular idea, but I'm not a fan of saying, well, I don't know which idea, so I'm just going to give them all and hope that I get feedback on everything or anything. I'd say, you know what, you got to make a commitment, choose an idea and send it. But if you're sending 60 seconds, don't send 3 or 4 pieces in 60 seconds, because now, you know, we don't have a chance to really focus in on one of them. That what didn't go on for enough time. Should we have done the vocal one? That could have been cool. What about that action one at the end? What, you know, I don't know. So I'm not a fan of doing it that way. I think there should be one idea submitted, maybe in the guidelines too. But anyway.
Yeah, and Tom, what you're saying, I actually was holding out hope that we would have this very sort of vulnerable and arresting vocal piece that would then sort of transition to the middle. And then I was praying the vocal piece would come back in and I'd be like, oh, lovely. And instead I got pushed into an alternate metaverse reality and I had no idea where I was. And I was actually slightly scared. So
It was a medley.
Again, Tom, you know, you're saying what all of us are saying. If you've got 1 minute, give us one beautiful thing that we can remember, because now, unfortunately, I wish the vocals came back. That's my one memory. Because it was good. I was sort of like, this is super bold and unique and pretty, like it was very vulnerable and natural sounding. And like there was this person doing this vocal thing and then it was gone. Never to be heard again for the rest of the piece.
I know. Everyone's like, but I can do this too, and I can do this too. I know. I feel the pain. We all do.
Yeah. Not on the first date.
No, right? You scare them away that way. For me.
Yeah.
I think there's a way to do that too, where, you know, like, again, the point of a demo is to make an impression, especially if it's a sight unseen, like just make an impression and it's not a pitch on a specific thing. And I found myself as soon as it was over, I thought, how cool would it have been if essentially all of those got smeared together, where like those voices are like all reverbed and you know, kind of getting sucked into the orchestra as it's coming in at the end, and it felt like that actually is one piece. That is some you know, person getting pulled into a hurricane kind of scene. You actually could do something really cool and kind of have the cake and eat it too, if you just fully commit to the idea of, okay, I'm going to start with this vocal piece, and then get into this sort of all out orchestral statement that absorbs and you know, the vocal piece is subsumed by it. That could have been a way to take a bold opening gesture and double down on it, while still also going, by the way, I can do two very different things. Like that could have been actually quite savvy, but instead it felt like Lucas accidentally hit next in Spotify and cut it off, which is like abrasive. You know, it's actually the opposite. It makes me go, you know, especially because the orchestral piece actually sounded like it had some promise. I hear all this weird movement in the strings that I wasn't expecting, this and then these trumpets, and I thought, ooh, that's interesting, and it's fading out, it's gone.
God, yeah, good point there, Austin. Yeah.
There could be a situation where you may have decided that it's a good thing to put lots of things in there. In a minute's not enough time, but it's reminding me of the first demo I ever made. And the first demo that I made, I had a bunch of short pieces and I was trying to do everything in every style possible. And, you know, it was like, I think it had like a samba thing in there, and it had like some techno piece, and it had like some other kind of more, you know, romantic ballad thing. And now with hindsight, I think that wasn't really a great demo. It was not a great idea. And the thing is, it's tried to do a lot of things. And also, not everyone can do every single style really, really, really well. Some people can. But I don't know. It's like, if you just get the things that you can do really, and, you know, and you feel really passionate about, and you do that thing, and especially in a minute, you know, definitely you want to stick with one idea if you can.
And that's the theme of this feedback. Oh boy. All right. Next.
Mason. I was just playing Persona 5 Royal Edition, and I mean, that's game ready. You could have just dropped that right into the game. It's so spot on idiomatically for that. So I don't have anything to say other than that could have shipped for that title or something like that. So
it feels wrong to give feedback to somebody who has explicitly facilitated hiring me before. It feels very reversed of the normal order of things.
I think this is a trap for you.
I know.
Yeah. This is a baited trap from Mason. Let's see what they say. I like the cue, and it's like game ready for that style. So.
I mean, he's a wicked talent. Mason is no joke. And I'd heard this because I'm just, he's a dear friend and I'm like a fan. Every time he shares stuff online, I'm like, damn. I'm always messaging him going, how'd you make the, snares pop like that? Or like, he's just got a real great ear for mix and especially, anything kind of stemming out of the anime world. He knows his shit backward and forward like very few people. And
hardcore fan.
This is good emblematic of what we were talking about before of like, do your listening. This is clearly somebody who's done their listening. That's I think a good takeaway for other folks rather than just sit here and bend over backwards discussing our love of Mason. There is actually something very useful to take away from this. Is somebody who they weren't stepping into a genre for the first time with a thing like this. They could actually hold their own in a field where there's a pretty high bar for about mixing and production and a density standpoint. Songs like this are so packed to the brim with movement and color and content, and he knows what he's doing, and it shows.
This was one good example of if you're going to put in more than one style in one piece, whether this was part of the piece or not, it wasn't even the point. It was almost like humorous because it started with this Breath of the Wild, just simple piano, Japanese Zelda-ish kind of open world feel, and then it goes straight into like RPG super battle mode anime, and it was formulaically perfect stereotype approach there. So I kind of like that. That's a good example of if you're gonna kind of cheat the system a little bit and put two things in an idea, why not do it that way with personality and just like that, just a little piece. Just like, hey, and then, didn't really take away. Actually, it kind of made me smile more. So, yeah, I don't think we should be giving Mason feedback on the music. I don't know. Just saying, I don't know. Mason.
Yeah, it's like, who let this guy in?
He's a plant.
Yeah.
Good job, Mason.
Yeah, good job. I mean, it's authentic. It's clearly there's reverence for
a class on anime.
A huge body of work that's been around for so long. So very impressive from that standpoint.
Nicely done.
Well, probably nothing to add to that. I thought it was great too. Definitely a cool anime type vibe. But if we're going to be telling people that they need to basically think about how they're going to be packaging up their ideas, it would be remiss not to say, just going with ending the 60-second demo just with a fading out of the song could be possibly buttoned up a little more neatly, but no, it was very cool, very, very good.
that the ending? I wish people would just take that extra 5 minutes and just put an ending on the piece, will you? I'm feeling
you could have done a 10 BPM shift and had it land right where you want.
Come on, man. I mean, I'm sorry. I already just started talking. I couldn't help myself. That was really cool. I mean, everything about that was wonderful. I think I would love to get my hands on that mix and just make it a little more present and a little more of the high end and crisp and a little exciter action in there, but really, really nice. There was one thing in the melody, right after that part, both times it was like a dog was like, I just was like, huh? Like there was something in the melody. I was like, what is that? But it got my attention. So that was great. And, just the ending. I was like, come on. Great stuff. I mean, guys.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple. I mean, Tom, you and I produced a lot of scores together with that stuff. I mean, I remember we worked with Misha, Mansour, and on Anniversary and a couple things. Work with the Bryans on some things. So if you're going to do that, I have a lot of opinions about guitar and about that. So I think compositionally, it was solid, but I think that needs to double down with like huge amount of studio production, because we know a lot of amazing radio ready band producers. Tom's here, and there's a lot of other folks we work with that are in the studio and they're getting the tones, and it's like, everyone has 50 different custom tube amps that they tweak and they get the tone and they geek out on the tone side of it. So clearly this is a great rough demo, and I can hear, and Tom and a lot of us can hear exactly where that should go. But it would be nice to kind of maybe get the folks together and get it produced and recorded and mastered. And Tom, you said it yourself, if you got those stems, it would come out completely, it would be a whole nother level. Yeah. And I could see your face going, oh, so that's all I would say. For me, it was a production issue. I mean, I love guitar playing of all different styles and all different kinds. And, I think that is a very, the bar is so high. I mean, we just came out of Mason, who had a love letter to an entire, established body of work. This is another thing that you need to double down on the production to even be in the ballpark of even near what folks are doing right now. And there are people working in games every day that are setting the state of the art and the bar for this style. So for me, it's just a production issue. Yeah. But compositionally, it was cool. And it was unexpected. I definitely had wait, what? Yeah, what was that? But
Jason?
Sure. I thought it was a really, really cool rock piece. I thought it had a nice, nice energy to it. And of course, it's already been mentioned. The ending thing is definitely an issue, but yeah, no, I thought it was good. It had a good, fun rock energy to it. So very cool.
I'll just add my own little 2 cents in praise of it. Was that your point is well made, both Tom and Paul, in terms of the kind of where the bar is of true studio production of this particular kind of genre. But because we're at a GameSoundCon demo derby, I found myself constantly waiting for when's the orchestra going to come in, or when's the thing where they go, yes, but it's for video games, and there's all these expectations. And and then when it didn't, and it just was so committed to it being what it was, I thought, you know what, props for having the confidence to just be that. And not feel the need to say, and here comes the big French horn section and the la-da-la-da-la-da that we are accustomed to hearing. These things, so many of these over the years, there's been that promise of someone kind of owning a thing that they love, and then feeling the gravitational pull of some sense, some never quite spoken, but somehow known expectation of where it ought to then go. And the fact that this didn't do that in the specific context of a demo derby, I found charming. And that's why I'd like to double that with your comments of, if we set aside that and just think of it as a piece of produced music, there's this feedback to offer to it. But when I was looking at it through the lens of like, I kept waiting for my heart to be broken, for the sort of cliche thing to veer in and take over it. And it perhaps had its own cliches to contend with, but I found myself pleased by the confidence to just stay the course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're talking 20 years of demo derbies, folks, for a lot of us now. So what Austin's talking about is we've had so many of these, now. So I agree with you, Austin, that we were used to like, where's cliche heartbreak coming in at 42 seconds or whatever, right? Didn't do it. So that's awesome. Way to win just for that.
Own it.
Right?
You mind if I kick us off?
Go for it.
As someone who's written a lot of music kind of adjacent stylistically to this sort of thing, two immediate thoughts were, I really liked how understated it started. And then when these strings come in, I found myself ready to be kind of enveloped into this very spacey, like Olafur Arnold's, very verby sort of thing. And the horn samples, the very sampley horns below that really took away from that for me. I felt like just let this be strings, even if they are sampled strings, they're reasonably well programmed. At least it felt like that to me. I felt like that feels like the vibrato of a sample that's sort of wavering the pitch more than a person playing. But I it's a little tricky to tell in this context if I'm wrong there. But even then, even despite that, it wasn't a terribly produced string sample, which made the horns really pop out as flat and not intonation wise, but production wise. And it didn't need it. You had this lovely kind of very whispery, cloudy synth texture that the strings. So I would have just made your strings a hell of a lot wetter in the mix and gotten rid of the kind of unnecessary horn part below. And then also you gave us 20 seconds of material over a 60-second runtime. Yeah, I see you nodding, Paul. I'll let you elaborate on that. But that was to me, it actually. I wanted less. I thought it would have won with not compositionally, but palette wise. It started off so spare and it had me, and then it started to pile on things that actually somehow took away from it. So sort of promising, and then yeah. But go ahead.
Beautifully said, Austin. And just for all of you watching, Austin has always written things that are incredibly intimate and can draw you in incredibly close. And I was with you, Austin. We started with this, and I was like, wow, this is going to be, there's going to be some depth. And then the first 15 seconds went out the window, and we started another piece, somewhat. And then unfortunately for me, bringing in, it wasn't just the repetition, because we needed some movement. I mean, you basically rephrased the same four notes too many times, maybe. We could have had some variation and some movement there, but even in the sparseness, I was excited for a more chamber sort of intimate feeling, but then there's an element of drawing in the listener and bringing them in more closely and more intimately, and there could have been much more sort of rubato and breathing, and you were talking about the there's a rubato and then there's this vibrato on the string and the kind of performance. So if we had some live instruments and we had some air in there and we had it all moving, it would have had this intimacy, barring though the compositional aspect that you already mentioned, where repetition, Tom said it already, repetition is going to be sort of your death knell. So I like the strong 4-note thing, but then you need to start moving that around and taking us on the journey. But I was a little confused because I heard this sort of crafted texture in the beginning, and I even heard some underpinnings of some things. Oh, this is going to be sort of an Arvo Pärt sort of evolving thing, and then it just sort of went away. So I'm going to defer really to Austin, who in a lot of ways has defined the state of the art with this sort of being able to bring in someone that close intimately with music in that sense. I would agree, and I think that there's a lesson there. Less is more, and then obviously leaning on Tom just over the years about the breadth and the production and how much that can impact that other part of the conversation. If you're writing something intimate, then it has to be produced that way, and it has to be compositionally supported that way. So that might sound a little vague, but it's just if your intent is going to be that close and that the compositional choice is going to be about that intimate exchange, it has to be produced that way and it has to evoke that. And I think we were a little bit disconnected. It was kind of a miss there, I think.
Yeah, it started off really nicely. Again, it did draw me in, that low and high tonic note and the little texture. I was like, ooh, okay. The story begins. And I'm like, ooh, now where are we? Are we looking at a castle? Are we in this kind of vampire thing? I don't know. And then I think it just had too many things that were introduced into it. I plead guilty to especially earlier in my career, I would sometimes hide in my productions. I was so insecure perhaps about my ideas that I would just hide behind layers and layers and layers of stuff. And I think you don't need to do that. A really great question to ask yourself is, what can I take out? How much can I take out before I break it? And I think it would have been more effective with less, because it just, the more words you say, the less impactful each word is. And on that note, I'm going to stop talking.
As a piece of music, you can have a moment of stillness, and that can be very effective. And this definitely starts out that way. But in a 1-minute running time you have for a demo, I think that maybe for that situation, starting out with basically 18 seconds of the still moment might be too much time taken away from being able to show off what you want to show off. Because I think that it's maybe too long of 18 seconds of that moment, given the medium.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, down you go.
I think that does that bring us home?
That pretty much brings us to the end. So thank you everybody for attending the GameSoundCon Music Demo Derby for 2022. Thank you to Jason, Paul, Austin, and Tom for your valuable time and expertise. And we'll see you all at GameSoundCon. So
thanks everybody. Appreciate you submitting. It's a big thing. Like I kind of mentioned, we've all been doing this for quite a while. So kudos and congrats to all of you for submitting.
It always bears repeating that no matter how many times we've been in the very privileged position to give feedback on these, it takes some mettle to submit yourself to public scrutiny, and it's always worth just the sort of congrats on just having the gall to submit yourself to that. So, even if we were laying on some fairly thick feedback on some of these, no, it's coming from a place of respect that you even did this.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about.
Thanks all. See you online. See you on site. Have a good GameSoundCon.